In this video, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why chanting mantras can be so beneficial. So today, I'd like to talk about 3 reasons why chanting mantras is regarded to be one of the most powerful and potent yoga practices that we can undertake. In the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, we find that there are a number of sutras or verses that are dedicated to this important practice of chanting. In actual fact, it is regarded to be one of the highest practices in yoga, and that is because of the potential that it has to help transform our minds and to move the patterns of our mind in a new direction. And when we think about yoga as a practice which helps us to overcome our existing mental habituated patterns and create new patterns and eventually dissolve all of those patterns, there is no practice like chanting that even comes close to being able to move us in that direction. Which is why Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras says actually that by chanting the pranava mantra, which is Om, the Om chant, all things that we want to realize in yoga can be achieved. So there are 3 things I'd like to talk to you about today in relation to why chanting mantras are so powerful. And then in other videos, we're going to come on to the different mantras that can be used, how we chant them, and how different ways of chanting can lead towards different effects. So the first thing that's important to understand about a mantra, whether you are chanting it aloud, whether you are chanting it very, very softly or quietly, or whether you are chanting it mentally, is that simply by chanting a mantra, by bringing our attention onto the sound, the reverberation in our minds, in our bodies, we are stopping our mind from wandering anywhere else. And when you look at the definition of yoga that's given in the Yoga Sutras, yogaha chitta vritti nirodha, which simply means ceasing the activities of the mind and bringing our attention in a one-pointed manner onto an object that we choose for a sustained period of time, that is essentially the practice of yoga. Very difficult if you think about it, if you reflect on it, to bring our attention to one place for a sustained period of time. But by chanting a mantra over and over again in our minds, or over and over again out loud, or over and over again whispering, or very, very quietly, and by trying to bring our mind into connection with that mantra, with that sound, it means that by very nature of the practice, our mind simply can't wander. So we practice chanting, and over again our mind is going to wander, and over again we bring our mind back. And we notice that over time, the mantra becomes more and more easy to hold on to with our mind. And as a result of that, our mind tends to wander less. And that brings me on to the second point about mantra chanting. The first one is that by having a mantra in our mind, it means that we can't go into states of fear or into states of worry or into states of negativity because we let them go and come back to the mantra. But the second point is that the more we practice that, the more we create a new samskara or a new pattern in the mind, which keeps our mind focused and keeps our mind in this state of ekagrata, of one-pointedness. That means that we can choose to direct our mind where we want to direct it and away from the things that we don't want it to engage with. So for example, if we notice that our mind is wandering over and over again in an obsessive and compulsive way towards the future, by using a mantra in our daily practice and repeating that name or repeating that chant over and over again, we create a new groove in the mind which recognizes when our mind wanders away and draws it back automatically into the present moment. And we know from looking at yoga more broadly that when we are in the present moment, everything is okay. And we can come to a place of calmness and mental equanimity when our mind stops oscillating between all of these different things. The third and final point that I'd like to make today is that when we practice chanting a mantra, this is not something that we're just meant to do mechanically. So our mind is off thinking about something else, but somehow we're still chanting the mantra. The idea is that we come to understand the meaning of the mantra, the sentiment and the feeling of the mantra. And when we chant it, we start to reflect on its meaning or imbue the qualities that that mantra is pointing us towards. So for example, if we take the word Shanti and the mantra for Shanti, which can be chanted in different ways, but essentially Shanti, each time we chant that, if we visualize or we create a feeling state or a bhava within ourselves of being at peace, or recalling a memory, a smriti of when we were in a peaceful place, or imagining a peaceful ocean or lake at the center of our hearts, we start to practice not only bringing our mind into the moment and in connection to the words of the mantra, but we also start to create a feeling within ourselves of the meaning of that mantra. And the more that we bathe ourselves in the meaning and the feeling of that mantra and its meaning and its significance, the more it starts to bathe our mind in that feeling and then transform our mind in the direction of that feeling or that meaning. And that is why it is so important, the mantra that we use and the objects of attention that we focus on in meditation, because we spend so much time over the years focused on those things that we need them to be things that ultimately will help us to transform in a beneficial way, in a way that's going to help us to unpick our previous tendencies or patterns and arrive in a place where we can be more loving, more compassionate, more present, and more able to live our day-to-day lives in a state of peace and equanimity. So essentially three things, three benefits or three reasons why chanting is so powerful. One, it stops our mind from wandering elsewhere. Two, it starts to create patterns of stability in the mind to bring focus in one direction. And finally, by using the bhava or the feeling state that the mantra can create, we start to bathe our mind in that energy and start to move ourselves into a new and more positive way of seeing and our perspective on the world around us. So hopefully this will just be the first video in a series of videos that I'm going to publish in relation to chanting and mantra. I hope you found this useful, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Namaste.